Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions, and today something not unusual, but a little bit different, as we speak with Bob Koester. Bob Koester of Bob Koester Financial Services, his own company, which helps businesses out in achieving greater success. And he is really, really good at what he does, and I know him from being at the Kansas City Business Club, where we get together every Tuesday and for some other occasions, and I knew him in the context of being a businessman. And then one day he sidled over to me and said that he had some interesting musical stories if I was interested in something like that for a podcast, and I had no idea that it was going to be such an interesting story, as Bob Koester is a trombonist who played on some of the most iconic recordings in the history of popular music in the early 1970s in Philadelphia at Philadelphia International Records, things that you have heard by the Stylistics and many others. And he also played with fine orchestras in Philadelphia and opera companies as well. And then he moved to Las Vegas and for a few years played on the Las Vegas Strip with some of the biggest stars in all of show business there as well. From Dionne Warwick to Bob Newhart to Wilson Pickett to Tony Bennett, he has brushed elbows with some of the greats. He's recorded with the iconic production team, songwriting team of Gamble and Huff. The list goes on and on and on, so let him tell his really, really interesting story of being a musician and then transitioning at really rather a young age to the business world, but never leaving behind his love of music of all kinds. It's a great conversation. It fits right in with the Arts and Lifestyle template right here on the Reasonably Irreverent podcast, our Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Visions' goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. We're here once again with Dr. Brad Woodall from Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. Springtime, good weather's finally here. People want to stay active, and it's your job to make sure that they can stay active, and be healthy.
Danny, we see a lot of not just weekend warriors, but people that every day are having that want to get back to activity. Whether you're starting with walking, jogging, or maybe that first 5K of the year, we want to help you out. We specialize in taking care of all ages, from kids all the way to grandmas and grandpas, but absolutely specialize in getting you back to full function and keeping you in great shape.
So in short, how do we go about doing that?
The first thing is to schedule a consultation with one of our doctors and therapists so we can see how you move and how you're supposed to move. Based on our assessment, we can put together a short treatment plan and a set of goals to help you both feel better, function better, and most importantly, stay better for this year and many years to come.
Learn more at asfca.com/Danny. That's asfca.com/Danny. Let's have a brief conversation with David Schmidt from Pro Millennial. David, what differentiates you from other financial organizations?
I would say the passion we have for seeing our clients succeed is probably paramount to what we do here. There's no joy greater than watching a client accumulate wealth. I had a client that I've had for many years was able to buy his dream warehouse. Nothing too extravagant, but we had a savings plan in place and was able to see him fulfill his dreams.
And what else motivates you in this industry?
Well, lately it's been finding out inconsistencies in the marketplace, ferreting out some more than questionable ideas out there that what we're seeing with Bitcoin and a few of these other cryptocurrencies right now. I'm in the opinion where if it's untraceable, it really needs to be regulated in a big way right now.
To get more information and advice from David, visit ProMillennial.com or call 816-221-7775. That's 816-221-7775. We're here with Michael Barber, the CEO and founder of Microlight Corporation of America, the world leaders in laser therapy. And Michael, tell us a little bit about your product.
Our device is using a particular wavelength and power to reduce pain and swelling. My background is surgical lasers, but I've been involved with this particular device now for about the last 20 years, actually.
And I know that it works because I've had it used on me as well. And tell us about the relationship you have with your company and Canaway.
It's what I call a strategic business relationship in that Canaway, the leader in the field of the cannabinoid systems and CBD oil, but our device used in conjunction with Canaway CBD oil gives a better pain relief outcome for the patient.
And if you want to get that pain relief outcome like I did, you can reach their local representative, Sherry McCants, at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Bob, you're a child of New Jersey. Tell me what it was like growing up in the Rutherford, New Jersey area as a young boy.
Well, Rutherford, New Jersey was a really, really nice area. It's in Bergen County, New Jersey, which is, as the state is shaped, kind of abuts the lower part of New York State, so way up in the northeast corner. Recently famous for the Fort Lee Bridge scandal when Chris Christie was considering running for president. Bridgegate, I think it was called. That was one of the routes from North Jersey into New York City. And, it's a great old place. Rutherford sits up on a hill, and when the Dutch people actually settled there, not settled there, but the Dutch people in New York would go to Rutherford in the summer to get out of the heat of the city because it was enough higher. And in fact, one of the main roads in Rutherford is called Ridge Road, which, coincidentally or not, runs along the ridge of the hill.
That is very interesting, and it is a beautiful part of the country. My sister lives somewhat in that area, and you just so quickly transition when you're staying in the city or whatever to this absolutely beautiful countryside.
It really is. One of the things, though, that I remember so distinctly is when New York City had the blackout. After my entire life of being able to look out from Rutherford over the what we call the meadows, now they call it the Meadowlands, I guess officially,
right. Yep.
and see the skyline of New York for my entire life, and all of a sudden one night it wasn't there.
I absolutely remember that night. It's amazing what happens when there is a blackout. This was in 1964. We went out and threw the football around in the moonlight because it was so bright and there's no lights to distract from it. So that's my memory of the blackout anyway. But I can truly imagine what it must have been like when you're young and you're outside the city and you're looking into the city. Does it cause you to be a bit of a dreamer?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that, you just kind of say, well, gee, I wonder if I were there then, what would I be doing? Or if I'm there sometime in the future, what would I be doing? Or how would I do it? And what kind of things do I have to go through to get there? It's just kind of a unique place to grow up. I haven't been back in several years, but and I understand it's changed quite a bit. But it was a great place to be a kid.
When did you start to get involved with music?
In elementary school. I wanted to play in a band, and my first band director had me start on the trumpet. And for a couple of reasons, that didn't work out particularly well. So he suggested that I try the baritone horn, which I did. And without getting overly technical, the trumpet and the baritone horn can both read treble clef. Baritone horn also typically reads bass clef. Well, I only read treble clef. So my junior high band director thought it would really be critical to learn how to read bass clef too. And he said, well, if you're going to learn how to read a new clef, why don't you learn how to play a new horn? I said, well, okay, what do I know? So he gave me a trombone, and kind of the rest is history.
What was it about the trombone that maybe attracted you to it? It's not the most simple instrument to play. It's different. You have to do more than obviously just use your breathing, and you have to use actually a physical tool as well. What are the differences, and what attracted you to it?
Well, I always liked the sound, and I liked the challenge of learning how to play the slide as opposed to just pushing valves up and down. The trombone, along with the stringed instruments, has what's called an infinitely variable scale. So, unlike a keyed instrument or a valved instrument, you make certain combinations of valves to produce certain pitches. With a trombone and with the stringed instruments, because the pitch producer is moving, there's all kinds of room between correct pitches to play incorrect pitches. So one of the challenges is to be sure that you hear and know where the correct pitch positions are for the correct pitches that you're trying to play. And that was an interesting experiment, and it's something even to this day that I still work on very, very carefully.
It sounds to me like people who tried the trombone, it seems like it would be pretty easy to be really bad at playing the trombone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. Plus the fact it's an ungainly thing, and they're a pain in the neck to carry on a school bus. But they're still a lot of fun. And, of course, you can, because the slide moves all over the place, you can make it just a lot of different sounds with it. In fact, some people derisively call it the clown of the orchestra.
When did you realize that you had some aptitude in it?
Late junior high school, and then into high school.
And was it something that people told you? You just had a sense of it? You were just surpassing your bandmates and getting first chair, or what was it?
I sensed it, and my parents found a really, really good teacher for me, guy that I was just absolutely crazy about. He actually really became kind of like a second father or an additional father. And he really brought me along the way and helped me decide that that's what at least at that time, what I wanted to do with my life. I guess to be a little bit more specific, without being overly technical, from the very, very beginning, I had a funny way of producing sound, so I was really limited as to the range that I could play on the instrument. And Larry, my teacher, was able to help me correct all of that over a period of several months. And from there, it was basically let's round the final turn and head for the finish line, because that just opened the whole thing up for me.
What kind of music did you like while you were growing up?
Well, I liked it all. I'm probably going to alienate some of your listeners with this. I've never been a particularly big fan of country music, but I like classical music. I love the opera, jazz. I love rock and roll. I played a lot of rock and roll. So it wasn't like it was really specifically geared in any one direction.
Was it there, as you got into the late 60s or something, there was a period where the likes of Chicago and Blood, Sweat, and Tears became kind of a thing. Was that sort of an influence for you, or did you play in bands besides like the high school band or bands that were playing more popular music? Well,
by the time BS&T in Chicago came along, I was in college.
Okay.
And was already very, very active as a professional freelancer in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And probably it's really hard for me to compare BS&T and Chicago, because while they're similar in that they're horn-line bands, the music that they did, it was completely different.
Yes, it was, yes.
Did I like one more than the other? Maybe depending on what mood I was in. BS&T was they. In a way, Danny, it's kind of like comparing the Beatles and the Stones.
Right, yes.
With DS&T being more down the Beatles avenue, and Chicago being more down the Stones avenue, and in that it was just a lot earthier.
Let's talk about. Okay, go ahead.
And I was recording so much rhythm and blues and black rock and roll that I was geared probably in ways more towards Chicago than BS&T.
Let's talk about when you talked about your getting to college, and you had two very fine musical institutions that you were going to choose from. Talk about that selection in your life. Sure.
I had Larry Todd, my teacher, really wanted me to go to Curtis, the Curtis Institute, and study with an old teacher of his, a man named Charles Gusikoff, who for many, many years was the principal trombone player in the Philadelphia Orchestra. Well, I applied at Curtis, and the year that I applied, as it turned out, they weren't going to have a vacancy in the trombone studio. So I also applied at Juilliard and went over and auditioned and was accepted there, and was really just about prepared to go to Juilliard, except for two things. Number one is I would have had to live at home, and I didn't want to do that. And number two, an opening came up at Curtis. They had anticipated there wouldn't be one, and so I went to Philadelphia and auditioned and won that audition, and that really pretty much made a decision for me.
When did you start to do things professionally, musically?
The first job that I ever played professionally was probably in high school, but really professionally was in the fall of 1966. A fellow in Philadelphia named Ed Cascarella called and asked if I could substitute for him in a couple of performances by the Philadelphia Lyric Opera Company. And I could, and I did, and that was when my real professional career started, would be 1966.
And when did you start to play popular music professionally?
About the same time.
And how does the business of that work when you're a instrumentalist playing in either a really huge orchestra like the Philadelphia Orchestra or the opera, accompanying the opera, or session musician?
Well, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. Let's start with the differences. Back in those days, one of the first things that you did if you decided you wanted to be a professional musician, was join the union. And after you'd done that, then you went through this drill of calling contractors and letting them know that you were out there, and if they needed a sub or somebody couldn't make it or one thing or another, that you'd sure appreciate it if they'd give you a try. And that was basically how I built the freelance side of my career, which was more the commercial side of the business. The orchestra side, had I not gone to Curtis, I probably would never have had the opportunity to play in the Philadelphia Orchestra.
And how did that process come about?
Well, members of the Philadelphia Orchestra were on the faculty at Curtis.
Uh-huh.
So if there was something that they needed an extra player for or something like that, those of us that were at Curtis would get the first call for that stuff. A good example of which is there's an old RCA recording of the Philadelphia Orchestra with Eugene Ormandy playing the 1812 Overture. And they doubled the brass section for that particular recording, and I was on that along with several of my contemporaries, plus the regular brass players in the orchestra.
So you played more in recordings for the Philadelphia Orchestra, not in the orchestra itself for performances?
Right. I did one or two live performances with them at their summer series at the Robin Hood Dell in Fairmount Park in Philadelphia. And there's an interesting story there too. At least I think it's interesting. I had a summer job in New York City, and my mother called at lunchtime one day, and she said, Mason Jones, who was then the personnel manager of the Philadelphia Orchestra, asked if you could come to Philadelphia today and play the concert that night at Robin Hood Dell. And I said, well, yeah, sure, of course I can. So I went home and got what I needed to get and got on the train and went to Philadelphia and went out to play the concert. And it was the big tune on the concert that night was the Berlioz Symphony Fantastique. And about 5 minutes from the end, the conductor got lost, and it was just kind of chaotic for about, I don't know, a minute or so before we saved him.
That's amazing. That is really amazing. Give people a sense of what it was like to try to be a working freelance musician, what the pay scale was like. You mentioned that you had a summer job, so I imagine a lot of times you had to do things like that. What was that like as you transitioned out of college?
Well, I was very fortunate because there was a lot of work in Philadelphia at the time, and I don't want to sound egotistical, but I pretty much did all of it, so I really didn't have to have any other jobs while I was playing music for a living. Yeah, it was very good.
I mean, that's always that's really the first goal of a musician, isn't it?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, if you can do something in the world that I grew up in, if you can just play and make a good living, that's ideal. If you play and want to teach, that's probably number two. If you can play in those days, if you can play and have to teach, that was, for me and my contemporaries, we're starting to move away from the ideal. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with teaching. I was just never very good at it because I didn't particularly enjoy it.
So we have talked, and I can't even imagine how, I've said this to you a couple times. You have such an incredible backstory, and you just never. It's not like you walk around telling everybody about it. But one of the things that obviously is part of the reason for this is that you, as part of your commercial work, you played on a whole bunch of the very familiar Sound of Philadelphia type of music of Gamble and Huff.
Exactly. Yeah, I sure did. Interestingly enough, this year is the 50th anniversary of what ultimately became known as Philadelphia International Records, and I guess the city is making a real big deal out of it, which they should. But we did a lot of recording for Gamble and Huff. A lot of what I did were things that Tom Bell had written for the Stylistics and some of the others. One really, really neat experience. I don't think the record ever came out till about 73, although we made it in 70 or 71. We actually did a completely live session with Dionne Warwick. And we had, 50 people crammed into the studio or something like that, but everything was live, including her. There were no overdubs. So that was a really unique experience. If you ever watched film clips of scoring sessions in the movies, that's a lot like that date that we did with Dionne. So it's the only one I've ever done like that, and it was a great time.
Talk about some of the familiar recordings that you would have participated in.
Well, the one that everybody's seen as much as anything is a tune called Betcha by Golly Wow that the Stylistics did. A couple of, and frankly, Danny, I've really a lot of them over the years, but there's I stumbled on one not long ago. There was a girl group from Washington called Brenda and the Tabulations, and they did a song called "Right on the Tip of My Tongue" that we did, and it's actually gotten popular again. We did so much with the stylistics, and then a lot of guys that we never really knew who we were doing them for.
Okay.
You know, you'd go in and you'd have music and it'd have a title, and maybe you knew who the group was and maybe you didn't. With Tom Bell's, we always knew who it was. But we did a couple of, and these were fun too, a couple of sessions with Wilson Pickett, backing him. I mean, it was a long list. And then there were places like the Latin Casino, which was a dinner theater over in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and Palumbo's dinner theater in South Philadelphia, that were star policy places. So, you know, I did people like Vic Damone and Tony Bennett and lots of others.
So tell me about the lifestyle and, you know, the sort of a week in the life of you as a session musician.
Sure. Usually what would happen is we'd know by the end of say this week what we're going to be doing next week, and so the record sessions in those days were typically 3 hours for the horns at least, and we'd go in and typically they would have already put down the rhythm tracks and maybe put down the string tracks. And the vocal tracks would already be down, and then we'd lay the horns on top of everything else. So we didn't have the number of retakes typically that they might have had when they were doing the vocal tracks. So it was really possible to go in and do 3, 4, 5, 6 songs in a 3-hour session. So that might be during the day. Then that evening, I might go. I might be doing a show at one of the theaters. Did Man of La Mancha for 37 weeks one year, and then the next year did Fiddler on the Roof for about the same length of time. Or if there was an opera going on, 1 or 2 mornings, early afternoons in that week would be the opera rehearsals. And then there'd be 1 or 2 evening performances, depending on what was scheduled. You know, and then there was stuff like that everybody else does, like cut the grass and go fishing.
So, were you in a position where you actually, it sounds like maybe you were actually having to pick and choose or turn down work at certain times?
Yeah, Danny, I tried to never turn anything down. And it was, but there was plenty of work, so I just, and everybody sort of just kind of worked everybody's schedule out. One of the things that I never did is I and still to this day don't, unless there's an awfully good reason. If I took a job, I did that job. I didn't cancel one because something came along that paid more. So people knew that, and I was always able to, you know, I never knowingly burned any bridges back in those days. So I think that kept me pretty busy.
What would be, talk about some of the pay scale and things like that would go on, or a session, or working, as you mentioned, for Man of La Mancha, or what type of money were we talking about?
Well, back in those days, the shows were probably, that's a long time ago, but they probably paid around, probably $250 or so a week. And recording scale was $95 for a 3-hour session. So that's not to say for a minute that every single recording we did was a union scale date. In fact, the first couple I did, we did at Cameo Parkway Studios in Philadelphia for $10 a tune. So we go in at like 11 o'clock Sunday morning, record a 12-tune album, and walk out 2 hours later with $120. You know, I mean, it's not a precise mathematical art.
Sounds like it added up pretty good, though.
Oh yeah, yeah. And a lot of us in those days probably, adjusted for inflation, made more then than we do now.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Time to spend a few minutes with my good friend Jeff Dillon from Dillon's Heating and Cooling. And Jeff, what differentiates your company from others in the industry?
Plain and simple, we're honest. We have integrity, and we're going to do things right the first time. There's way too many companies out there that lie, cheat, hide things from the homeowner or customer, and we're not about that. It's kind of funny sometimes. I actually am so honest with some people, it kind of surprises them, but sometimes it's good for business, sometimes it's bad for business, but ultimately it's the kind of business that I want to run, is an honest one.
And that family way of treating things is part of your slogan, and it's also part of one of your great features that you offer to customers.
Our slogan is like family. Our most popular maintenance plan is called the Family Plan. It's very similar to a lot of ones out there. The little tweak that we do to ours, 1% off for every 2 years. They have a continued maintenance plan with us. If they have a maintenance plan for 10 years, then we give them 5% off, no questions asked.
You can find out more about Dillon's Heating and Cooling and all their great range of services at dillonsheatingandcooling.com. That's Dillon's with an S. The phone number, 913-214-1343.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Llewellyn for the 23rd Street Brewery. Thank you so much for supporting local restaurants, especially through this pandemic. And you know what? We're almost through it. At the 23rd Street Brewery, we have brought in a few more tables. You can wear a mask if you want, or not. It's your choice. Other than that, we're open 11:30 every single day. So come see us at the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence.
I'm here with Joe Spiker, owner of Easton Roofing, and boy, we had to negotiate a million things in 2020, but Easton Roofing navigated them all. As 2021 rolls out, what should we expect this coming storm season?
Well, Danny, it'll be the same thing as it is every year. The storms come, and you've got the guys out knocking on doors, offering quote-unquote free inspections. Be wary as a homeowner. If somebody's knocking on your door, they probably need the work, and if they need the work that bad, they may be willing to do something untoward to get it. So if somebody knocks on your door, says they want to give you a free inspection, just tell them have a great day and give us a call. We'll come out for free and give you a good, honest opinion as to whether or not you need to do anything at all with your roof.
And what's the best way to get in touch with Easton Roofing?
You can always find us online at eastonroofing.com or give us a call at 913-257-5426.
Easton Roofing, integrity matters. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson & Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Bob Koester is our guest. Of course, he works in the finance industry and has his own excellent business these days. And just by a little happenstance, I have come to find out his backstory. He just wandered over to me one time at the breakfast club we belong to and said, I've got a lot of great musical stories for you if you're interested sometime. And I certainly am, and they certainly are. So what was the transition in your life when you decided or when things maybe changed enough that you would head out to Las Vegas?
The work really started to dry up in Philadelphia.
What was the reason behind that?
Probably budgetary things and changing tastes. The opera companies really needed to combine, and so in the best interest of both of each of their budgets. So instead of going from maybe 10 operas a year with one company and 8 operas a year with another company, became more like 12 with one company.
Right.
And the dinner theaters, they started to kind of fall apart. The Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, burned down, which didn't help anything. The traveling shows that used to use Philadelphia as a significant test market before they would open in New York did less and less of that. So the market, the recording business stayed very, very good. But the market for live performing music in the theaters and in the dinner theaters really started to dwindle, but it was still booming in Las Vegas. So like a lot of other lines of work, you go where the work is. And so we went out there. We were there for about 3 years and had a great experience. It was just, don't know that I'd want to do it again, but it was sure fun at the time.
Let's backtrack just a little. You've talked about the opera on a couple of occasions. Your wife is an opera singer. How did you meet?
We were both at Curtis together.
Okay.
She grew up here, and a wonderful voice. But we just, I regret it now, but she kind of gave up her career to hang out with me, and that's why we ended up going to Las Vegas. Is again, that's where the work was, and she went along, and the rest, that's kind of the story there.
What is the time frame here when you decide to transition to Las Vegas? How old were you, and how difficult a decision was that?
I was 23, and it was a very easy decision for me. It was a very easy decision. That's where the work was. I knew guys that were already out there and working, having met them at the different particularly the dinner theaters in and around Philadelphia. I knew a couple of piano players that were with entertainers that were working out there. And so we decided to give it a try. I got a real big boost from a guy that actually knew of me, a guy named Ron Geiger, who lived in Philadelphia and had gone to Las Vegas, and he was really instrumental in getting me around and getting me introduced and kind of getting my name out there. Probably the biggest single thing that worked in my advantage was like the first Saturday or the first weekend I was there, maybe this first month. The union had what they called a reading session at the Union Hall, and all the guys that were new in town were encouraged to go down there, and everybody that showed up would each get their turn playing with the band that they assembled for this reading set, that the union assembled for this reading session. And the guys on that band were all the guys that were working on the strip at that time. So they were all really, really good players. So I went down and took my turn and sat back down, and one of the guys in the trombone section was a guy named Jim Trimble, and Trimble kept asking for me to come back up. And so I ended up playing most of that reading session. And I guess enough people liked what they heard because I was really never out of work after that.
So you mentioned that this went for 3 years. You're still in your 20s. What was your mindset then? Did you think that this was something that you're just going to, that you were going to be a musician your entire life, or were you thinking that this is just something I have to take advantage of for as long as I can? What was your thought process at that point?
Well, at that point, I really thought that that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. It was starting to be pretty obvious that things were changing in Las Vegas. And although I'd really been fortunate enough to have a lot of success, what we should have done, and we've talked about this many times, was we should have gone on to Los Angeles.
Right.
And tried to break into studio recording there. Probably because I was as young as I was, I wasn't as confident in my own ability then as I probably should be, and I wasn't sure I could make it in Los Angeles. Our oldest daughter was born in Las Vegas, and it was a different place then, and we really didn't want to raise her in Las Vegas. So my wife's parents were still here, and her sisters are here. So we just decided instead of going back east, we'd come halfway. And so I got out of the music business, and we came back here, and I started in banking, and that's kind of 40-something years ago.
So that's what, late 70s or so, is something like that?
Yeah. 76.
Okay. And
no, I'm sorry, 73.
So how difficult a decision was that?
You know, Danny, it really wasn't that hard at the time. My wife was never particularly happy in Las Vegas, large part because it's so darn hot. And it was just, for whatever reason, it was the right time to do something else. So it really wasn't that difficult a decision to make.
Also, I imagine just by the nature of what you were doing in Las Vegas, I imagine that hours were pretty bad.
Well, they were great hours for a musician, but they, I mean, typically, well, let me back up. One of the union rules at the time was that you had to have as much time between shows as the longest of each of the two shows. So, in other words, if the longest show of the night was 2 hours, then you had to have 2 hours minimum of 2 hours between shows. So at the Tropicana, our shows were at 7:30 and 11:30. So, I'd leave the house probably 6:45, get back home around 10 for an hour or so, go back downtown, back down on the Strip, play the second show, and then we'd usually hang out for a little bit. So I'd typically be home by 1:30 or 2 o'clock. But yeah, I was always wanting to be up pretty early. So it was, I think it was as normal as we could make something that was abnormal.
So who were some of the people you performed with in Las Vegas?
Well, I did production shows,
okay.
Primarily, although I did do about 6 months at the Desert Inn, and did two of my favorite guys were Bob Newhart and Rich Little. Bob Newhart was a funny guy.
Yep.
And every once in a while, he would ask some of us if we would stay on stage during his act. See, the way it worked was it's called playing on or playing off. We'd play the comedian who always opened the show on, and then they'd drop a scrim in front of the band while they did their 20 minutes or whatever it was, and then we'd quietly get back on the stand and play them off, and then play the headliner act on. So every once in a while, Bob Newhart had asked some of us if we would sit on stage during the first show during his act, and because as we later learned, he was trying new material. So we'd hear something that, and you got to keep in mind, you're hearing basically the same thing 12 times a week.
Right.
So, we'd hear something different, and it sometimes it'd just crack us up, and he'd say to the audience, "Well, I'm going to keep that in the show. The band likes it." And then, the guys that aren't around anymore. I mean, I did guys like Sergio Franchi and Trini Lopez.
Right.
Gee whiz, I don't know. As I say, guys that were really, really popular then, but have long since gone away.
So you say the transition wasn't very difficult, but how did you make that the transition into what you would eventually do? You said you got into banking. How did that happen?
Well, John Sullivan, who ran was president at the time of what was Roland Park State Bank and Trust Company over in Roland Park, and my father-in-law were really, really good friends. So I'd been talking to my father-in-law about maybe getting into banking, and he said, "Well, why don't you go over and talk to John, because he'll shoot straight with you." And we were here for Christmas or something, and talk to him a little bit and see if you think you'd like it. So I went over and talked to John, and I thought, well, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So I didn't think anything much about it. And then, I don't know, 90 days or so later, the phone rang one morning, and it was John Sullivan offering me a job. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll take it. So we loaded up the truck and moved back here, and I've been in the finance business ever since.
You mentioned that you still are working on something with your trumpet today. When you got out of the music business per se, how much music did you still play?
I didn't play at all for about 10 years.
Okay.
I was really, really burnt out on the business end of it at the time, and I just didn't want to play. And then for some reason, I got the horn out one day and started to play a little bit and realized that it was something that I missed doing. And so I started to practice, and one thing led to another, and somebody needed a bass trombone player for something here, and they suggested that I get hired, and I did, and that got me started here in Kansas City. And that really is how that all happened. I went on to did a number of several years at Starlight, and played with the Kansas City Symphony a number of times, and did the shows. You know, I've never done much recording here. I don't know that there's ever been the kind of institutional recording that we had, say, in Philadelphia. You know, there's a zillion bands that record, but not necessarily bands that hire big horn sections and things like that.
So you rekindled your love for it, and so did you just sort of do as well? You said before you didn't you don't turn things down. Did you do it on a limited basis, or you're in your banking business? So what was your musical relationship like with your regular life, as it were?
When we were really busy here, I did them both. You know, I do Starlight all 3 or 4 shows a summer, and usually what I would do is take a day of vacation for the Monday rehearsal or Tuesday rehearsal, and then we'd open the show and do 7 nights, and go to work every day.
There you go.
Or if I was playing with Steve Miller or Vince Bilardo or somebody like that, they were nights on the weekends, and so I would do that and go to work all week. And if the work were out there, I would still be doing that. I have to tell you, even for all the commercial playing that I've done, my first love is playing classical music, and so I'm very fortunate to still be playing with the Northland Symphony, and that gives me my classical music fix for the year, other than listening.
It sounds like although you've transitioned into being, a financial expert, as it were, that music has always been a keynote to your life.
Absolutely. I still have things that I don't particularly like, and I still really prefer to listen to classical music and play classical music. But there's an awful lot of other stuff out there that I enjoy both playing and listening to.
And do you feel like that having that kind of balance in your life has been a benefit to you in your business world?
I really do. It takes a lot of discipline to play a musical instrument well. And I think that discipline essentially is an outgrowth of a mathematical inclination. And that kind of attention to detail and attention to facts, I think, really helps anybody that wants to be in the finance business. I know it's helped me.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new. This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Cinematic Visions, an affordable and award-winning solution for professional media production since 2003.